Catholic Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska quoted Pope Francis in a powerful speech last week against the funding of abortions abroad.
We take our most divisive social issue, which is not settled in our nation, and we export it to peoples around the world in violation of their cultural norms, undermining the very purpose of diplomacy. It smacks of arrogance, it smacks of elitism, and Pope Francis has called this ideological colonization.
These remarks came during a House Appropriations Committee meeting. Fortenberry saying the purpose of foreign aid is to uphold human dignity, not to export abortion. In another pro-life push, the Catholic congressman recently introduced pro-life legislation called the Care for Her Act to care for expectant mothers and their babies. Among other things, it allows mothers to get a tax credit for unborn children and provides her with a list of available resources. Joining us now on Zoom is Representative Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska. Congressman, welcome back to the show. You brought up Pope Francis and his warning against ideological colonization. Can you explain how this applies to U.S. foreign aid and abortion?
Yes, Catherine, thank you so much for highlighting this essential issue. Of course, those of us who firmly believe in the rights of all people, that we ought to be in a space of tolerance, particularly given the divisions that we've seen over the last year, and fully believe that we shouldn't exclude one group of persons, namely the unborn and their mothers, have to speak out clearly about this aggressive, unthinkable attempt now to take our most divisive social issue and export it onto the poor of the world. For 50 years now, there's been a settlement in this regard. Even people who don't agree on the life issue have agreed that taxpayer money should not go for the provision of abortion here in America, and certainly not overseas. 60% of Americans agree with that here, but when you move the idea to, again, funding abortion overseas, it gets closer to 80%. It's unthinkable that we've gotten to this space. It was a moment to speak clearly because I believe this smacks of arrogance and elitism. It is an ideological colonization, as the Pope has said, and it actually is counterproductive to the norms of diplomacy, which are to be in the space of mutuality, seeking to build trust and friendships so that everyone is safe and there can be a healthy prosperity. How does this forward that? That was the question to the committee.
Well, thank you for speaking so clearly on that. I want to turn to a different topic. You recently introduced your piece of pro-life legislation, the Care for Her Act. I understand you made it to ensure pregnant women know which resources are available to them. Congressman, do you see opportunity for bipartisan support here? Shouldn't everyone want to support a pregnant woman?
Catherine, I believe that this could be a transformative piece of legislation. Of course, we stand against the horror of abortion because it takes the life of the unborn child and it harms women and it creates profit for the abortion industry led by Planned Parenthood. All of those things are so damaging to the soul of America. On the other side of this is about what we're also for. In that moment of vulnerability, when there is news of an unexpected pregnancy, it says fundamentally that we are committed to care as a community for the journey of life, for the unborn child, at the moment of birth and after birth, with this full complement of services, both medical as well as mentorship, housing, employment. We also give a tax credit for the unborn child. We do that for children, and we do move it now to the unborn child. What this does is make a declarative statement that the United States government backs life, and we will commit resources to helping persons who are in vulnerable circumstances, again, before birth, at birth, and after birth. I'm excited by the possibility that this could break a new chapter of pro-life communications and maybe invite people who have never considered our position before.
I hope so too. Congressman, we have just over 1 minute left, but I do want to ask you about this. You sit on the House Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for reviewing and marking up President Biden's budget proposal. He gutted the Hyde Amendment. Congressman, can you tell us the latest? Where do things stand now with Biden's budget?
Well, again, remember President Biden used to be for the Hyde Amendment before he is now against it. And it's really, really distressing because, again, all this does is say taxpayer money will not be used to fund abortion. About 60% of Americans agree with that. Again, when you move the equation overseas, it's 80%. So most people see that even though they might not be with us in terms of a fullness of a pro-life view, they do not agree that taxpayer money should be going there. So this is an ideological statement driven by those who, again, are going to force this consideration on the American people against their will. It's so destructive and harmful, and it destroys the ability to be bipartisan and do important things like keeping our country safe, promoting the proper type of economic prosperity, and protecting those who are in vulnerable circumstances. I really hope that we can fix this before the end of the year, or else this budget process is going to really break. We're dug in. We're not going to let this happen. We cannot let this happen to America.
Absolutely. Well, grateful for your pro-life leadership. Representative Jeff Fortenberry, Nebraska, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
To continue the discussion, we are joined in studio by Prudence Robertson, Communications Associate at the Susan B. Anthony List. Prudence, great to speak with you. We just heard from Representative Fortenberry about the latest on Hyde. In recent days, a series of pro-life lawmakers have called for a vote on H.R. 18, which would make the Hyde Amendment permanent law. Do you think Speaker Pelosi will allow for a vote on this?
Well, unfortunately, our so-called Catholic Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is about as extreme as they come on abortion. Most recently, she dodged a question on whether or not she believes a 15-week-old baby growing in the womb is a human being. But, you know, she should have no problem, calling for a vote on the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act. If this is really where she stands on abortion, if this is really where she's put her stake in the ground, her constituents deserve to know that. And it's so important that we have strong members of Congress like Representative Fortenberry and other members on the Appropriations Committee fighting this tough battle for Hyde and dozens of other pro-life amendments, riders that apply to different funding streams that keep taxpayer money out of the abortion industry.
Absolutely. That's a great reminder about those other riders as well. As lawmakers have been debating Hyde on Capitol Hill, take a listen to what Democrat Representative Susie Lee of Nevada had to say. Listen to this.
I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. I grew up as a Catholic. I'm one of 8 children. I have 2 children of my own. And the one thing that I value most is that this is an incredibly personal decision and one that women should be able to make themselves.
Prudence, what's your response to that, especially as a fellow Catholic?
Well, her stance truly is misguided and tragic. I am part of a big Catholic family. My mom is one of 8 children, and I'm one of 4, and I always told my parents that I wanted more siblings. My family is the source of my deeply held pro-life views. And the truth is that abortion is at the center of the breakdown of the family, Catherine. And a child growing in the womb isn't just a medical condition, it's a human life. And to say that anyone should have the choice to snuff out that life is a complete travesty. It's so important that we are raising awareness and asserting the humanity of the unborn child, especially when members like Nancy Pelosi and Representative Lee claim to be lifting women up, but really their statements just show a complete disregard for what women need, especially when facing an unplanned pregnancy, and that is support and love and compassion.
Absolutely, that's well said. Prudence, we have just over a minute left, but I do want to ask, during the House Appropriations Committee meeting, Congressman Fortenberry, as we shared earlier, also raised the concern of the funding of abortion abroad. How concerning is that today? Because I know the Trump administration did take action to stop that.
Yes, he made huge strides in this realm to protect Americans from having to fund abortion overseas and protecting the unborn. But Democrats just last week, they moved to repeal the Helms Amendment, which directly bans federal funding of abortion overseas. They also want to double the funding that groups like the UNFPA receive. And this is a group that has openly partnered with some of the worst human rights abusers in our world, such as China and North Korea. They support China's population control policies. And Democrats also want to expand funding for other groups that are involved in supporting coercive abortion and even forced sterilization of women in these foreign nations. And the truth is, when we fund abortion in these countries, we are compounding crises that are already occurring and already causing women to suffer. And like Representative Fortenberry said, Americans have no interest in becoming the #1 exporter of abortion overseas. This really just has to be stopped.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing us up to speed with the latest on Capitol Hill. Prudence Robertson of the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.